Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So today has been a very busy day. Actually, the last 3 days, or 2 previous days before today. It's the Keene Convention is going on. The tech panel is happening right now. And after that would be the final keynote speech. And, well, I'm having to miss it, but I will be able to watch it all later on this glorious thing called YouTube. And I'm sure that you all know what YouTube is. And if you missed Keene Convention, then you, too, will be able to watch all of the videos from Keene Convention 2014 on YouTube. They'll begin getting uploaded in probably about a week, and then it's going to be, I think, 1 video per week until all of them are up. And they'll be put up in chronological order. So the secession panel that I was on this morning and the Bitcoin panel that I was on as closely as 35 minutes ago, as of the time that I am recording this and the live broadcast, then, that will wind up coming out towards the end. But all of that, keeneconvention.info is where you can find info on that, and all of the videos will get posted on that website. But Keene Convention, it's, what I'm just going to talk about for a little bit before I get into the news and whatnot that I have. But Keene Convention is kind of a hotel-like convention that's set in Keene, but unlike most other hotel conventions, especially the more popular Liberty Forum that also happens in New Hampshire, all of the speakers and panelists are people that are involved with New Hampshire liberty activism. So, most of the people have been movers for the Free State Project. Some have been what they call pre-staters, and others are people that, didn't move here necessarily as a participant of the Free State Project, but they, want to promote liberty, and they're doing so in New Hampshire. So I was on the secession panel this morning, and that panel was very interesting, and it could have been probably twice as long as it was, because towards the end, it sort of got really interesting, because one of the other panelists, Lauren Rumpler, also known as Objectivist Girl, she was mentioning about how the former Soviet Union collapsed and, 14 new nations came about, or 14 new independent countries came about. I would contend that they had always been nations. But, with the collapse of one empire came 14 new countries, and there wasn't, shots fired. There was no war to, create their independence. And while that certainly is true, if you look at, the history of new nations since then, the ones that have international recognition, and that was what really sort of, sparked a controversy. But unfortunately, it was at the very end of the panel, so I didn't have time to explain it. But what I had mentioned was, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, all of the other new countries that have gained international acceptance have done so with the help of the United Nations. And as much as I think that the United Nations needs to go away, it also seems as though they kind of have a purpose, but the purpose, it's one of these double-edged swords. They have a purpose in helping a new nation get international recognition, but they are also preventing the organization, the UN, is preventing nations or new countries from gaining international recognition, because you've got the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the United States and Russia being 2 of those, and it seems that those are the 2 countries primarily that are blocking recognition of one or more countries. For instance, the Palestinian state or the Palestinian territories, whatever it is that you want to use, whatever term you want to use to refer to the West Bank and Gaza, it's the United States that is blocking their admission into the UN. And I don't necessarily think that admission into the UN is the end-all, be-all. And as I've said, I think that the UN needs to not exist. But because the U.S. has veto power, then they are preventing a more wide-scale recognition of Palestine. And Russia is doing the same for Kosovo. Russia is preventing, because the 5 members of the Security Council have veto power, meaning that any one of the 15 if it's one of the 5 members of the permanent members, one of those 5 permanent members can block anything that the other 14 members of the Security Council want to happen. So let's just say that the other 14 members of the Security Council want Palestine and Kosovo to both be recognized. Well, the U.S. would be blocking Palestine and Russia would be blocking Kosovo. So it's that is the downfall as well. But when you look at East Timor and South Sudan, both of which got recognized independence, within the last probably 15, 20 years. South Sudan was in 2011, and I forget exactly when East Timor was given, international recognition of independence, but it's definitely been within the last 15 years. And the way that they got that recognition was by working very closely with the United Nations. So the point of the secession panel was to discuss the possibility of New Hampshire independence. And I think that some of the people at the convention, or some people that might wind up watching later on YouTube, might think that I was actually opposed to the idea of New Hampshire independence or California's independence or any other state in the U.S. declaring independence, when in fact, no, I think that there should be 7 billion nations. The problem is that the UN exists, so you can't have the international recognition. And I think that, at least from Lauren Rumpler, because she had mentioned to me after the panel about, well, why do we need international recognition? Like, screw it. And I said, well, if you want to travel anywhere, then you want other countries to accept your passport. You don't want to have a passport for a country that you don't want to belong to, that country being the U.S. passport. So if you're living in a independent New Hampshire, you don't want a United States passport, because that then sort of defeats the point of trying to gain independence, or having actually, had the government of New Hampshire declaring independence. So there's that, and then there's also trade, and, there's only 18 miles of coastline. It would not be very difficult for the U.S. military to put a blockade on that amount of coastline. Of course, there is the international border with Canada, but if Canada doesn't recognize a free or independent New Hampshire, then, well, you're not really going to be able to trade from there either. So there are reasons why international recognition is important, but at the same time, I can understand somebody saying, I don't really care about international recognition. But then that's akin to an abusive spouse, or rather the abused spouse, filing for divorce, or wanting to file for divorce, but saying, I don't want to go to the courts. I'm just going to say I'm divorced. Well, nobody's going to recognize that. Nobody is going to recognize an independent New Hampshire if there isn't, some level of recognition elsewhere. So if Canada doesn't recognize an independent New Hampshire, chances are Europe won't either. And hopefully the U.S. government just collapses within my lifetime, and then we don't have to worry about the whole UN sort of thing. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. There's more when we come back. welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So I'm about to talk about a story, or rather read a story and discuss from the New York Times titled How Facebook is Changing the Way Its Users Consume Journalism. And I've noticed that, Facebook does affect what I see to some extent. So I've tried to reduce the amount of time that I'm actually on Facebook. I've also started using the list features, meaning that I see stuff from people that I actually want to see stuff from, instead of the random people that are on my list, some of whom I don't know and honestly don't even know why they're on my Facebook friends list. But Facebook makes it so difficult to go through and defriend people, because it used to be to where you could just click like defriend. But now Facebook refreshes the page every time you defriend someone. And if you have, 1,800 friends, then it's going to take a long time to, defriend somebody, let the page refresh, scroll back down in the list where you were, and then defriend somebody again, and do that to, prune out a couple of hundred people. But there are alternatives, one of which is liberty.me, a website that it's a social media network as well as a publishing platform. And pretty soon I will be doing a podcast for Liberty.me. It's going to be a Liberty.me exclusive podcast called Peace of Liberty, where peace is a backronym for promoting emancipation, alternative currencies, and enlightenment. So Peace of Liberty will be a 30-minute weekly podcast that I will be doing exclusively for Liberty.me. There are other podcasts that are exclusive to Liberty.me. There are audiobooks, or not audiobooks, there are ebooks. There are what they call Liberty Guides, which are short manuals. I have written one that has not yet been published. It's a how-to guide for publishing. And if you want to join Liberty.me and you don't want to pay the full amount of monies, then you can use code FPP Radio, and then it winds up saving you $5 a month. I forget what their monthly fee normally is. I wound up getting a 1 year for, a lump sum of money that I did during their fundraising campaign. So, right now I'm not paying monthly. I don't remember when my subscription runs out. But Liberty.me. And one thing that is really great about Liberty.me is because it's a paid service, it keeps away the trolls. Because I'm sure you deal with this on Facebook, where you'll post something and then you see, somebody that has nothing meaningful to say, and they just jump in there and sort of start an argument or a flame war for no reason other than to, get some laughs for themselves. You don't have to deal with that at Liberty.me. Again, Liberty.me, code FPP Radio, and that will save you, I believe, $5 per month. So the article here from the New York Times, how Facebook is changing the way its users consume journalism. Many of the people who read this article will do so because Greg Mara, 26 years old, a Facebook engineer, calculated that it was the kind of thing they might enjoy. Mr. Mara's team designs the code that drives Facebook's news feed, the stream of updates, photographs, videos, and stories that users see. He is also fast becoming one of the most influential people in the news business. Facebook now has a fifth of the world, meaning roughly 1.3 billion people, logging in at least once per month. It drives up 20% of traffic to news sites, according to figures from the analytics company Simple Reach. On mobile devices, the fastest-growing source of readers, the percentage is even higher, Simple Reach says, and they say that continues to increase. The social media company is increasingly becoming to the news business what Amazon is to book publishing, a behemoth that provides access to hundreds of millions of consumers and wields enormous power. About 30% of adults in the United States get their news from Facebook, according to a study from Pew Research. The fortunes of a news site, in short, can rise or fall depending on how it performs in Facebook's news feed. Though other services like Twitter and Google News can also exert a large influence, Facebook is at the forefront of a fundamental change in how people consume journalism. Most readers now come to it not through the print editions of newspapers and magazines or their homepages online, but through social media and search engines driven by an algorithm, which is a mathematical formula that predicts what users might want to read. It is a world of fragments filtered by code and delivered on demand. For news organizations, said Corey Hake, senior editor for digital news at The Washington Post, the shift represents the great unbundling of journalism. Just as the music industry has moved largely from selling albums to songs bought instantly online, publishers are increasingly reaching readers through individual pieces rather than complete editions of newspapers or magazines. A publication's homepage, according to Edward Kim, one of the co-founders of Simple Reach, will soon be important more as an advertisement of its brand than as a destination for its readers. People won't type in WashingtonPost.com anymore, according to Ms. Hike, saying it's search and social. The shift raises questions about the ability of computers to curate news, a role traditionally played by editors. It also has broader implications for the way people consume information and thus how they see the world. In an interview at Facebook's sprawling headquarters, which has a giant self-driving golf cart that takes workers between buildings, Mr. Mara said he did not think too much about the impact on journalism. Now, that's rather interesting that the guy one of the guys that helps create Facebook's algorithm that determines what you see in your newsfeed said that he did not think too much about the impact on journalism. And here's a quote. "We try to explicitly view ourselves not as editors. We don't want to have editorial judgment over the content that's in your feed. You've made your friends, you've connected to the pages that you want to connect to, and you're the best decider for the things that you care about." In Facebook's work on its users' newsfeed, Mara says, "We're saying we think that all of the stuff you've connected yourself to, this is the stuff you'd most be interested in reading." Roughly once a week, he and his team of about 16 people adjust the complex computer code that decides what to show a user when he or she first logs onto Facebook. The code is based on thousands and thousands of metrics, including what devices a user is on, how many comments or likes a story has received, and how long readers spend on an article. There is more, and it is interesting, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So I've got this article from the New York Times talking about how Facebook is changing the way that users consume journalism. And apparently there are 17 people that are on the team that come up with the algorithms that help determine what it is that you see, and they actually update the code every week. I had no clue that they updated the code every week, and according to one of the people, Greg Mara, who is one of the 17 members, the code is based on thousands and thousands of metrics, including what device you are on, how many comments or likes a story has received, and how long readers spend on an article. Now, I knew that likes and comments were used to factor in what people saw. So, obviously, something that has more likes and more comments will then show up in the newsfeed of more people, because they've started this thing of most popular instead of most recent, although you can still do the most recent, but it doesn't actually show you what is most recent. So maybe the people over there at Facebook need to look in the dictionary and find the definition of most recent. Most recent doesn't mean you put a story from 5 hours ago, and then a story from an hour and a half ago, and then a story from 19 hours ago, and then a story from 5 minutes ago, in that order, because that's not sorted by most recent. End of that rant. The article continues. It says the goal, that being the goal of the people that work on the metrics to figure out what it is that you see in your newsfeed, the goal is to identify what users most enjoy, and its results vary around the world. In India, for example, people tend to share what the company calls the ABCDs: astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and divinity. If Facebook's algorithm smiles on a publisher, the rewards in terms of traffic can be enormous. If Mr. Mara and his team decide that users do not enjoy certain things, such as teaser headlines that lure readers to click through to get all the information, it can mean ruin. When Facebook made changes to its algorithm in December 2013 to emphasize higher quality content, several so-called viral sites that had thrived, such as Upworthy, Distractify, and Elite Daily, saw large declines in their traffic. Facebook executives framed the company's relationship with publishers as mutually beneficial. When publishers promote their content on Facebook, its users have more engaging material to read, and the publishers get increased traffic driven to their sites. Numerous publications, including the New York Times, have met with Facebook officials to discuss how to improve their referral traffic. The increased traffic can potentially mean that the publisher can increase its advertising rates or convert some of those new readers into subscribers. Social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn want their users to spend more time or do more on their services, a concept known as engagement. That, according to Sean Munson, an assistant professor at the University of Washington, who studies the intersection of technology and behavior. Now, before I continue, since advertising was mentioned in a previous paragraph here, I think it's interesting to point out and should be noted that Facebook, one of the reasons that I have heard that one of their algorithms was changed is because they want people to advertise on their site. And, obviously, it makes sense. They make money on advertising. But it seems to be counterproductive, and maybe this is what the advocates of net neutrality are talking about, to where it's a pay-for-play sort of system. If net neutrality goes away, this being from the people that support it, I still am on the fence because I don't really understand. I've heard both sides, and I'm still confused about exactly what would happen and why and whatever. So let me just go based on the arguments of the people that say we need the government to ensure net neutrality. They say if you do away with it, then only the websites that people pay to see will be seen, and everything else will wind up having no traffic, and people won't be able to go there, and the websites will load slowly. Well, it seems what Facebook is doing to some extent is they're providing, advertising, and obviously that's what advertising does, but the websites such as New York Times that gets a lot of hits, they will pop their articles up in somebody's newsfeed more so than an article from my website, fpp.cc, or something from my SoundCloud archives or something from fppradio.com. because there are fewer people going to my site, and obviously I'm not expecting as many people to visit my website as visit the New York Times. But when you claim to base your algorithm on, you can sort by most recent, and then I see a post from the New York Times ahead of a post from somebody's, personal website, and the post from the personal website was made much more frequently than the post from the New York Times, you're not really sorting it by most recent. So what they've started doing is adding so-and-so commented on. And yes, of course, my friend commented on this 5 minutes ago, but the article was posted 27 hours ago. That still doesn't make it more recent of a post as a post. It means that there was more recent activity on that post, but the post itself was not more recent. So I think that they should change the algorithms to where you can actually sort by most recent, and it means most recent. So let me continue. It says Facebook officials say that the more time users spend at its site, the more likely there will be a robust exchange of diverse viewpoints and ideas shared online. Others fear that users will create their own echo chambers and filter out coverage they do not agree with, and that, according to Mr. Munson, is when you get conspiracy theories. Now, I don't agree with that because I know people that believe in some of the conspiracy theories, that they do talk to other people, and they don't surround themselves only with people that believe their weird conspiracy theories. So I'm not sure exactly what he means by that. Maybe he's talking about the conspiracy that Facebook is trying to control what people see, and I would say that's a fact. But anyway, let me continue. Ben Smith, editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed, a news and entertainment site, said his rule for writing and reporting in a fragmented age is simple: no filler. News organizations that still publish a print edition, he says, have slots, physical holes on paper or virtual ones on a homepage that results in the publication of stories that are not necessarily the most interesting or timely, but are required to fill space. It was partly to discourage such slot filling that BuzzFeed did not focus on its homepage when it first started. Mr. Kim of Simple Reach says he advises established media companies that it's dangerous to start to start chasing social. You'll end up like everyone else, and you'll lose your differentiation. The question that older publications that are not digital natives like BuzzFeed have to ask themselves is, are you creating content for the way that content is consumed in this environment? Now, that is a very interesting question. Are you creating content? And I'm really asking myself this question. Are you creating content for the way that content is consumed in this environment? And it seems that most content is consumed by clickbaiting. And I would say that I'm not, because I'm trying to differentiate myself. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Now, I'll get back to the story here from the New York Times momentarily. But first, I want to make sure that I remind you about the tour that I will be taking in the spring. I will be leaving New Hampshire on March 8th at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. I'll be returning June 21st at the beginning of the Porcupine Freedom Festival in the lovely White Mountains of Lancaster, New Hampshire. Or actually, the White Mountains aren't just in Lancaster, but Rogers Campground, which is where PorcFest takes place, is in Lancaster. And on the tour, I will be driving across the country in the vehicle that I call not a bus. It looks like a bus from the outside, but bus I found was a legal term That means vehicle with the capacity for 16 or more passengers plus a driver, and bus also requires a CDL. The thing that I have that is green and appears to be a bus from the outside, but actually is not a bus, is being converted into an RV. So I've got a bed, I've got shelving, and it's coming along. And I will be taking that on the road I plan to stop at least 10 cities for a few days in each city. The first planned stop is Pensacola, Florida, where I will spend some time with the fine people at Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, who are one of my sponsors, and they're just all around great people. So I'm going to spend some time with them and also head out to Sean's Outpost, which is a homeless shelter, or actually it's like a homeless village that is funded and run completely on Bitcoin. So I want to see what they're doing there. And then from Pensacola, the next planned stop is Austin, Texas. There will likely be a stop in between those two places. That has not yet been decided. There's still plenty of time. And one of the perks for the tour, because this is a tour that is being done by fundraising, one of the perks is you can have me stop in your town, meet up with your Liberty group, your Liberty on the Rock, Students for Liberty, whatever it is, and I'll speak to your group, hang out with you, find out what sort of Liberty things that you guys are doing, and hopefully try to convince you to bring your Liberty activism to New Hampshire, because when you concentrate Liberty people, then you do wind up making changes. And that's something that I've seen firsthand, and I've heard stories secondhand of things that happened, before I wound up coming to New Hampshire. But the tour, it will be funded through donations and other fundraising methods. And you can find out more about the tour and donate at tour.fppradio.com. I could keep talking about the tour and what I plan to do with the tour, but I definitely want to get back to the New York Times article. But again, tour.fppradio.com. And I mentioned briefly Austin, Texas. Want to mention why I'm going to Austin, Texas. The Bitcoin conference, the Texas Bitcoin Conference, will again be happening in Austin, Texas, towards the end of March next year. So I definitely want to go because I've never been to a Bitcoin conference before, and I know that there's a lot of Liberty people that go to those events. So if you want me to stop in your town somewhere before Austin or after the other cities that are definitely on the map, Sedona and Phoenix, which they're about an hour apart, but I'm only listing Sedona on the tour just instead of listing both. Sedona, Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, possibly Las Vegas. I'm still in talks with people there, and possibly Detroit. And again, you can go to tour.fppradio.com, find out more about the tour. There's a couple different ways to donate, and one of the perks, if you donate through the GoFundMe, is I will stop in your town if a donation of a certain size is given. So again, tour.fppradio.com. So the article here from the New York Times continues by saying that Ms. Hike, the Washington Post digital editor, is leading a team starting this year that aims to deliver different versions of the Post journalism to different people. And it would be based on information about how they come to an article, which device they are on, and even if it's a phone, which way they are holding the phone. She says, we're asking if there's a different kind of storytelling, not just an ideal presentation. For instance, she says some people reading the Post on a mobile phone during the day will probably want a different kind of reading experience than those who are on a Wi-Fi connection at home in the evening. Now, this is very interesting because it seems as though a journalism outlet such as the Washington Post is looking into implementing some of the Facebook algorithms that would, direct people within their website internally. And that just seems to be, one, a lot of work, and two, it just shows how Facebook can further change journalism and, news gathering and information seeking, if you will. The article continues. It says the Post is putting time and energy into such efforts because it is ultimately about sustaining our business and growing our audience, says Ms. Hike. More than half of mobile readers of the Washington Post are so-called millennials who consume news digitally and largely through social media sites like Facebook. Some publications have found a niche in taking the opposite approach. The Browser is edited by Robert Cottrell, a former journalist at the Financial Times and The Economist. Mr. Cottrell skims about 1,000 articles a day, and he says he then publishes 5 or 6 that he finds interesting for about 7,000 subscribers who pay a $20 per year fee. A recent selection included the life of an early 20th century American bricklayer, and a study of great Eastern philosophers. Mr. Cottrell says the general idea is to offer a few pieces each day which we think are both enjoyable and of lasting value. We're certainly at the other end of the process from the algorithm. Artificial intelligence, he says, may eventually be able to find a piece of writing moving. That makes no sense. Let me read this sentence again. Artificial intelligence, he says, may eventually be able to find a piece of writing moving in some sense and want to share it, but for the most part, computers rely on information gathered online, and that is going to be a very, very impoverished data set compared to a human being. Mr. Mara, the Facebook engineer, agrees that a human editor for each individual would be ideal, but it's not realistic to do that at a scale of every person on the planet, and saying, quote, so I think we'll have to have these hybrid systems like Newsfeed that are helping you find the things that you care about. It is simply, he said, a personalized newspaper. Now, what I would suggest, if you want to have, your own quote-unquote personalized newspaper, don't rely on the Facebook newsfeed to provide you news. Find websites that you like and find a news aggregator such as DigReader or Feedly or one of the others that is out there where you can put in an RSS feed, and then it will, every time there's an article posted to one of those websites and the RSS updates, it will then pull it into your news aggregator, and then you find the news that way. That's what I do for a lot of my news. Of course, there's news such as this article from the New York Times that I did not find that way. And I actually don't think that I found this through Facebook. I think I found this through Google News. But, there are ways that you can customize your news gathering experience without relying on Facebook. And, of course, yes, I am on Facebook, but I try to use Facebook more to have actual interactions with people. And I realize it's not the same as sitting down and talking to someone face-to-face. But when you're communicating with people that you call friends or close acquaintances, then it doesn't always have to be about the news. It can be about, like, hey, I got to sleep in today. And then people comment on it. So it seems that the social part of social networking is being removed. Stay tuned to Peace, Love, Liberty. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So you may have heard, you may not have heard, that speed cameras aren't actually about keeping people safe. They're not actually about getting people to slow down and obey the speed limit. Is that a weird, crazy conspiracy theory that you only hear when you operate in an echo chamber? Or is it something that's being admitted by the government in Chicago, Illinois? Well, there's an article from CBS Chicago that makes it appear as though, well, it's actually a fact, and it's being reported that way. And the government there in Chicago, Illinois, is trying to find a way to make up $50 million that they claim has been lost. They say, we've lost this $50 million in revenue. They lost revenue because what happened? Well, people were obeying the speed limits. The article, again, from CBS Chicago, and I hate when web pages do this to where they take a long time to load up and then you click down and then the entire page just shifts. So Chicagoans are costing the city tens of millions of dollars through good behavior. And give me just a second. I'm going to actually pull this article up on another computer, I believe. No, it's now functioning properly. Or at least I thought it was. And apologies for the technical errors. Okay, so the article here, Chicagoans are costing the city tens of millions of dollars through good behavior. You heard that right. Good behavior is bad for the budget. Real bad, according to CBS chief correspondent Jay Levine. And I think, hopefully, that this is Cody Wilson. Is this Cody Wilson?
Hey, this is Cody.
Hi, Cody. Darryl Perry, host of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Thank you for calling in. Apologies for the listeners where I started this article from CBS Chicago. I've posted the link on the Facebook and Twitter so that you can read the article yourself. Cody, thank you for joining. I hope the time change didn't throw you off.
No, it didn't. I actually meant to call you back, and then I called a 503 number that was in my log. Anyway, long story short, I was just on the phone with a guy disputing the charge for the ghost gunner, so it was a strange conversation because I was expecting you. So it was a very strange conversation.
Interesting. So the ghost gunner I have talked about on the show before, and it was actually when I was talking about the ghost gunner that I actually sent you an email, Cody, asking you to be on the show. And you were initially supposed to be on the show last week, but last Saturday I hit my head again and suffered another concussion. So that's why there was no live show last Sunday, and why, Cody, I had to reschedule with you. So now that I do have you on the show, there are so many questions that I have for you. But first, for people that might be listening that don't know who Cody Wilson is, could you give an introduction of yourself?
Oh, man. Well, I've heard enough now. I guess my name's Cody Wilson. I'm the director of Defense Distributed, which is a nonprofit run in the United States, which is basically operated to develop software and now hardware for the material expansion of your right to keep and bear arms, beyond just advocating or lobbying for certain industrial or personal protections in the courts or the legislatures. We seek an activist approach to actually give you expanded capacity, regardless of what the legal structure might be in your particular state or even country. So we're all about short-circuiting the law, expanding free spheres of action in an old anarchist sense, giving you the means to do the things that the legislature doesn't want you to do anyway.
So basically, you were helping people find the loopholes, and then you're showing them how to, make use of the loopholes.
Yeah. Loopholes is a good way to think about it, but we're coming up with so many loopholes at this point. There seems to not be a lot of loop left. One of my criticisms. So yeah, it's giving you the unmediated access to the critical information related to technical data, hardware, everything related to the traditional assault rifle, the battle rifle, the handgun, basically everything under that umbrella of rights and subsidiary rights related to the traditionally recognized Second Amendment.
And the first time that I ever heard the name Cody Wilson, it was in connection to the Liberator, which was the first, correct me if I'm wrong here, it was the first 3D printed handgun that actually fired a real bullet?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? There's certain innovations that it's just kind of anathema for anyone else to pursue. So that one was just on the table for a group of upstarts from Texas to just go do, because no one else had done it before. But, I'd add the second part. Plenty of people are willing to make things and tell you about making them. Few are willing to then immediately give them to you. So Defense Distributed, I should add, innovated a lot in the 3D printing space in 2012 and 2013. But I think the critical thing that set us apart from other companies was we innovated in an open source context. Every time we had a tested design that worked well for us, we released that design to the public, into the public domain, without copyright or patent.
Now, as somebody that, thinks that current IP laws are totally flawed and need to be completely overhauled, people ask me the question all the time of, well, if you give things away, then how do you make money? And, well, I sell books, and, I don't give away books. Well, every now and then I will. I was at the Keene convention over the weekend and had a raffle and gave away some books. But, there was, some kind of money coming in, and the monies raised from that raffle are going to the tour that I talked about. For the people that listened to the first hour, I talked about the tour during the last hour, and I'll probably talk about it again in the next show. But, it was a fundraiser, and, I gave away product. That's what happens during a fundraiser. But, my primary business isn't to give away a book. I do give away a newspaper, and that newspaper is funded from advertisers. I give away the archives to this radio show, but the hosting is paid for through people that, like the show, so they donate. So for your business model of, hey, we want to help people get around the loopholes in the right to bear arms, even though certain states have restrictions on who can and when and where and how. So you're saying, all right, so like here's this schematic. You plug it into a printer and it makes a gun, and here, have it for free. How do you make money giving away the thing that is your product?
Yeah, it's really expensive to run a business giving things away for free. But I would say in your case, and in the case of other, let's say, cultural producers and authors, perhaps it's a bit tougher these days. Although obviously you've found the key. The key is to find 1,000 people, 2,000 people that really like what you do and are willing to patronize you and therefore kind of support what you're doing as a cottage type industry, a cottage cultural industry. But in the case of hardware, it seems to me to be pretty simple. And there have been forerunners of concepts like this. I mean, even MakerBot, before it was purchased by Stratasys, operated as, this is a 3D printing company, they operated as an open source hardware firm what we basically are doing right now is selling an assembled kit to you of this Ghost Gunner CNC machine, and we can go into the machine and its details in a bit.
Yeah, so right now
also,
I'm not necessarily talking about the Ghost Gunner because I know that you have that for sale, but the Liberator, which was essentially your first product, you were giving away.
Well, I'll tell you, though, we didn't begin with Liberator. We began with printing lower receivers for AR-15 rifles, then printing magazines, then printing AK-47 magazines. And this is over a many-month period, and we ended up creating a file-sharing website called DevCAD.
Okay, hold your thought there. We're at the end of the segment. I definitely want to find out about what actually came before the Liberator, because I had not heard of any of these. Stay tuned, and you can find out as well. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. My guest is none other than Cody Wilson. I would say he's most known for the Liberator, or at least that's what he was most known for before creating the Ghost Gunner, which is a $1,200 CNC machine that you put an 80% lower receiver in, you push a button, and then it does its magic, and out comes a finished lower receiver that then is the official weapon part of something like an AR-15 or an AK-47. I'm not sure what all weapons you can make with, using just a lower receiver. Cody can definitely answer that question, but he was telling us all of the things that his company, Defense Distributed, made before they did the Liberator. Some of those, you said you were actually doing 3D printed lower receivers. You were doing magazines. Are you doing any of those illegal, 7-bullet magazines that you can't have in New York City?
Yeah, man. Actually, in February of 2013, we released what we called the Cuomo magazine. And this Cuomo magazine was a 30-round standard capacity printable magazine, the first one of ours that Philips worked really well. And in honor of the SAFE Act having been passed just a few days prior, we renamed it after Governor Cuomo in his honor, released it online. So we actually got a lot of practice from, I would say, December 2012 to really up until May 2013 of actually printing other rifle and handgun components. And really a lot of that taught us how to do the things that went into the Liberator. In fact, if you look carefully, well, to the trained eye, it's pretty obvious, but the Liberator pistol itself uses a standard AR-15 grip mount and trigger box and even an AR-15 handle. Now everything else is, of course, different, but we were just going with designs that we already kind of had in the computer. So it's really a path of least resistance. Half of the design features of the Liberator come right out of our AR-15 experience. Yeah,
and that just makes sense to use what you have.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the sort of I guess from the minimalist sort of lifestyle or a simple lifestyle of use what you have. I recently took apart a bunk bed frame and reassembled parts of it to build a 3-level shelf. So, I used what I had. We're going to have to do that soon, too, as well, actually. We're looking for shelving for our new warehouse space. So, that's a great idea. I'm going to write that down. But, yeah, we've, look, man, Defense Distributed was operating on, through the whole Liberator phase. I mean, almost for 2 years, we were operating on just, $18,000. It's not, this is a budget that many Liberty groups are, aware of. I mean, we weren't some huge R&D firm, right? We were just doing what we could with what was basically an available class of technology that had kind of just become affordable enough for guys like us to experiment with. Now we've reached another level now in the past year, but we still plan to design around and have a design ethic that considers this kind of common user who's not too professional, not well capitalized, and I think with that ethic, we've had a lot of success. So for someone that has never used a 3D printer before, are there certain types of 3D printers that cannot be used to make some of your equipment? Because, and the reason I ask that is because I know that, you know, Staples, for instance, they sell something called the Cube, and it's like a, you know, 8-inch by 8-inch by 8-inch printable area. Is there anything that would be used for, say, this 30-round magazine or one of the lower receivers that you guys print that could not be printed on one of these Cube devices?
No, it's not. It's not the device that limits you. It's often the material, and a lot of retail devices have moved away from the material ABS, which is the kind of standard plastic that we design a lot of our stuff in. But as far as I'm aware, 3D Systems Cube that you mentioned, I know of a guy in Washington, D.C., or near D.C., who printed a full Liberator with a Cube. So now, I never heard how successful his Liberator design was in its actual functioning, but basically any machine out there that uses the material to the specs that we've, designated can create these devices and these articles.
And then from the 3D printing stuff, and I know that, you know, you're still doing the 3D printer stuff, but you've sort of advanced a little bit to, like, you know, actually having home CNC machines to where, you know, I can set this CNC machine on the desk, plug it into my USB port. That still blows me away that I can plug a CNC machine into a USB port and then, you know, put in a chunk of metal. Of course, it has to be a specific chunk of metal. And then I press start, and then it winds up taking an 80% lower receiver and turning it into a 100% lower receiver that has no serial number.
Yeah. I mean, it's and we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, it's definitely felt as an advancement from our company.
Well, you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're making the wheel affordable to people that don't have $15,000 for a regular size CNC machine.
There you go, and it's actually really considered this way in the law as well. In fact, the trouble with terms like 80% receiver, which aren't actually black letter law terms. These are just kind of terms of art used in administrative guidance in the ATF and the courts. Courts have in the past, talking about Article 3 judges here, federal courts have ruled that an 80% lower is something that requires 8 hours of labor or $15,000 of capital. They have assumed a certain prior stasis of technology, a prior status quo in terms of effort and material to get you to a certain place on that lower. And maybe this is a clumsy way of saying it, but now we've definitely lowered the bar to access. In fact, we're struggling to keep up with demand. I mean, I've got a 6-month wait list on these machines after only having them, for sale for really about 2 weeks.
Now,
I mean, that's crazy.
I heard something, and I don't know how factual this is. Hopefully you can tell me. Pretty much within two days after you made the Ghost Gunner available, you sold out?
Yeah, exactly. And we kept then offering more machines than we were really prepared to make because we didn't understand that the demand would be so intense, and we didn't want to lose that demand. We wanted to try to meet the challenge of the additional demand. So we kept raising the price and offering 100 more units, and it kept selling out. In fact, so we sold out about 3 days in a row, more than just that first time. And then I had to just call it at 500 and just say, look, it's going to take me 4 months to make these 500 boxes. I got to stop. So now we have a wait list. But look, man, I'm trying to upgrade as fast as I can and get enough people on to make them as fast as we can get them ordered.
Now, I definitely want to find out, and there's not time in this segment, so I'll throw out the teaser. How did you come up with the idea for the Ghost Gunner device? I've heard an interview with Ernest Hancock where you explained the name, and that's a great story too, but how did you come up with the idea for the actual device? Was it simply... Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. We'll get back to Cody Wilson in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. Actually, and this might make some people feel old, they have been in business since 1977, which is longer than I've been alive. And the fact that they've been around so long should tell you that, they're doing a good job at what they do. People do trust them, and maybe you should too. They now take Bitcoin so that you can turn some of your profits into a long-term, more stable investment. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage for knowledgeable advice on investing, or to actually buy some gold or silver. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Back to Cody Wilson, the proprietor. I guess proprietor is the correct term. Correct me if I'm wrong. Proprietor of Defense Distributed, the creator of the Liberator and the Ghost Gunner. Are all of those factual statements, Cody?
I call myself the director of Defense Distributed. Because we're a nonprofit, there's no actual ownership structure, but these are small points.
Okay. So the director of Defense Distributed. And I wanted to get to the how you came up with the idea for the Ghost Gunner. Was it simply wanting to, try to lower the bar for entry so that pretty much anybody could do this? Or are some of the pro-government people right that you're just trying to help criminals get guns?
I think that criticism begs a certain question. I mean, certain jurisdictions define possession of these articles as criminal in the first place. So, of course, I'm helping certain criminals get access to these things. I mean, a little bit of the cart before the horse. Maybe that's even a stupid point to make, but I guess everything starts with a theoretical interest first for me. And it was really hearing Kevin DeLeon, the president of the Senate Democrats in California, say this word, ghost guns, phrase. And, that was really powerful for me because in some of our theory, the things that we read, we believe that they will tell you what haunts them and what they fear, and that they direct power specifically for the purposes of absolute prevention and social administration, and you could see it at work here. California had proposed for itself a regime for the total regulation and pre-registration of the creation of all homemade firearms. It was going to try to cleave that entire private activity into a really, really constrained sphere, choke it out, kill the culture, and then make sure that all California gun commerce happened through traditional gun manufacturing. This is progressivism, by the way, but it's a separate point. Anyway, seeing that at work in real time was its own inspiration, and we took the terms. I didn't even have the idea, the name for the ghost gun. That was given to us by them, and we looked at, all right, how could we make it easy to create an AR-15 scenario where anyone can now more easily hand make their own AR-15 rifle? How can we automate it? How can we use some of the things we've already learned how to do? And we looked in the open source world, and we saw that there were a few available open source CNC mills, but none of them were really good at cutting metal. They could cut metal with an asterisk, but with the way that they did drives, the way that their rail systems and their stepper motors were a bit inadequate for doing this level of detailed, fine work. So we started with the Shipoko and other open source projects and controllers, and then built a machine over about 6 months that did what we thought it should be able to do to cut AR-15 receivers. And pretty much from there, man, once we had a working prototype, we showed it to a few people, put it up for sale, and everything else has been sales and marketing. That's the story.
Is there a certain type of 80%, and I know that that's not the technical term, but that's what the places such as Ares Armor and other places that sell the unfinished lower, they call it an 80%. So is there a certain type of metal 80% lower that must be purchased? Is there only one kind of metal lower that is made? For a while I worked for Ruger, or actually I worked for a temp agency and I was assigned at Ruger, but basically I worked at Ruger.
Gotcha.
And there were various different types of compounds that we would put into the machines that I was working with. There was a alloy, and then there was a stainless, and then there was something else. I think there might have been, not the machines that I worked with, but one of the others where they were doing aluminum. So is there a standard sort of thing for the 80% lower, or does it come in all kinds? Like, there's alloy, there's stainless, there's aluminum.
Right. No, I mean, we're talking any alloy of aluminum here. That's a standard mil spec, 80% lower. Like, that's sold commercially. At first, we were recommending a kind of subdivision of lowers that didn't have the rear takedown wheel milled out. That's a small point. In fact, I haven't even really addressed it on our website yet. But we can mill any. This machine can mill any 80% lower. That's with the rear takedown well milled or not, as long as it's aluminum. This thing doesn't cut, or we haven't even used it to cut titanium or other metals yet. And the cooling system is really air cooled with there's a substrate used on the end mill, but basically we only recommend it to cut aluminum and metals of lesser hardness. So that's the answer to your question.
Okay, and well that was one part. So is aluminum the standard thing that is used for a lower receiver?
Look, in my experience, yes, actually. Like, anodized aluminum parts seem to be the predominant way that you have commercial AR-15s. I mean, there's commercial polymer receivers, but in my experience, this seems to be an exception. Glass reinforced nylon and other things. I mean, I'm more familiar with the plastic side, but as far as I know, yeah, the AR-15 and the M4, all this stuff since Stoner has relied upon a lightweight aluminum design. And I don't believe that there are hard exceptions to that rule. But you're calling out my experience in guns. I don't want to claim any that I don't have, but that's my understanding.
Right, and obviously you know more about this than I do. I only worked for Ruger for 8 months, and I'm not selling these equipments. So you definitely do have more experience than I do. And here's another sort of odd question. So if somebody downloads a bunch of stuff from Defense Distributed, and then they buy the Ghost Gunner, and then they find a supplier that sells an 80% lower, and they mill the 80% lower. Can they then 3D print everything else that needs to be attached to that to make an AR-15?
That would be amazing, but and though they could, no, you still need a steel barrel for an AR-15. I mean, we're talking about standard components that still have to be attached to this rifle, and really including the upper as well, and the bolt. Everything needs to be hardened steel on the upper of that thing. So, I mean, outside like the shroud and the rails and everything. So, no, honestly, we're solving a political problem here more than making a hard material advance. This is enabling someone who might have otherwise been uncomfortable machining a lower by hand with hand tools, or taking it to a gunsmith to have it finished for them, giving them a machine that is automated enough to at least give them the sense of comfort of doing that work in their own garage outside of any paperwork process.
Do you foresee this, and by this I mean the Ghost Gunner, do you foresee it as possibly being able to open up an agorist gun milling sort of industry?
Well, I don't see why not. I mean, honestly, that industry should already exist. I mean, the market incentives are already there. I don't think they're added to enough with this machine. But maybe the machine sparks a degree of innovation and development. All
right, Cody, we'll be back in just a moment, and I want to find out your path to liberty. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. My guest, Cody Wilson, the director of Defense Distributed, the creator of the Liberator, the Ghost Gunner, and self-avowed anarchist. And I love when I hear somebody doing a mainstream media sort of interview and they're quoted as saying, like, Cody Wilson, an anarchist, believes blah, 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 and he invented this thing. So the question that I have is not, what is anarchy? Because I've talked about that enough on this show to where, hopefully people that hear that word out of my mouth don't get scared. My question for you, though, Cody, is, were you always libertarian-ish, or was it something that you sort of had to, progress through of finding out, hey, maybe this government stuff isn't so good. Oh, hey, like taxes are horrible, and now I'm a libertarian.
Yeah, I would say I always had dispositionally, I was just raised to have a friendly contempt for authority. But I mean, it's nothing exceptional. Maybe I've always thought the rules don't apply to me or something. But beyond the psychological, I mean, I would call my family, small C conservative and classically liberal in the sense that we recognize it. So, a healthy respect for property rights and common law justice. And my father's an attorney, so I had an earlier insight into the practice of law and juridical practice before maybe most people. And I went to law school myself, but really, I guess by the time I was in high school, I was something of like a post-Marxist. And to kind of speed this along, I discovered Hans Hermann Hoppe after reading Jürgen Habermas. And basically, Hoppe was my kind of ticket to going back through the catalog of von Mises' work and really most of the work of the Austrian school. And even though I don't dwell there, I don't really consider myself an Austrian. That was my education into modern libertarianism as a movement and as a political philosophy. And so, yeah, I consider myself a fellow traveler, even though these days I kind of dwell in more arcane literatures.
Such as?
The work of Alain Badiou as a moral philosopher, the work of Jean Baudrillard as basically a kind of post-situationist, or, you don't want to call it postmodern, but really like theories of the spectacle, theories of culture, simulation comes to mind, and basically cultural criticism and cultural theory more than political theory.
And there's the quote, I forget who had said it because I would love to attribute the quote to its, I guess, originator, is there's a book inside of every one of us. Have you ever thought of writing a book about some of the adventures, if you will, that you've had over these last couple of years with, the Liberator and now the Ghost Gunner? And I'm sure that there's going to be something super exciting that happens in the life of Cody Wilson in the year 2015.
It's funny that you asked. I had a deal with Simon & Schuster since last year to write a book, and in fact, that book is now finished. This isn't news. I mean, but I'm not revealing anything. But yeah, that book should be published by Simon & Schuster in the spring of 2015.
Okay, so I honestly had no clue that you had written a book or that it was due out next year.
I don't really talk about it, and it's I don't let it be talked about. But yeah, I had been working on a book all last year, and I was working on Dark Wallet and laying low while we fought the State Department, and so I had time actually. I was able to write most of a book over the last 12 months.
So. Just, I know you said you don't like talking about it, but if I could just prod a little bit, what is the book about?
Well, so the book is on its face about the 9 months of Defense Distributed's origins and how we got to the Liberator, how we printed the Liberator. That's the arc. That's the kind of backbone of the story. But really, it's, I guess, Here's your hints, right? It's really about dislocated conscience, about like millennial political conscience and the struggling to overcome this just onerous status quo. And but it's all handled with more like literary touch than a political philosophy touch. I mean, I'm not trying to write a manifesto. There's plenty of manifestos and white papers. So I do it. I give you something literary. I give you something contemplative, and I hope that it's effective.
Well, it's something that I certainly look forward to reading. And if you are looking for anybody to turn that into an audiobook for you, it is something that I have done in the past and I would love to do again, is audiobook work. And since you had mentioned Dark Wallet, I completely forgot that you were involved in Dark Wallet.
Well, it's not important to me to be recognized there, but yeah, actually, I thought if I threw my hat into the ring there, we could really get some attention for that project. I don't think I was wrong. It seems like I'll have to inject myself again right before we come up with the beta. Maybe that's a hint, but I am going back to London in a month, and we're going to do some work there because Dark Wallet's almost in its public beta.
Yeah, and I have downloaded the Dark Wallet, and I've used it a couple of times. And since you're involved, if you don't mind, I would like to, sort of throw out some ideas. And maybe I'm just using Dark Wallet wrong. I don't know. But it doesn't seem as though it's possible to send a stealth-to-stealth transaction. Is that something that you're working on allowing, or am I doing something wrong here?
Well, when did you try to do that? Now, let's troubleshoot this on the show. When did you try to make that happen?
A couple of months ago.
Okay. Well, this isn't your fault, but so I believe all current alpha releases now enable stealth to stealth. But that's our fault. That's our lack of communication, right? If you weren't on the mailing list, you wouldn't know the recent list of changes and updates because we just even got to 0.7. Oh, I don't know, last week. So we've hardened all kinds of things, and I believe stealth to stealth is possible now, even before the beta. So I'd have you look at it again.
Okay, I certainly will, because I've tried using it with Brian Sovereign, who I'm sure you're familiar with. I know that my listeners are, because I've mentioned him numerous times. He is the host of Sovereign Tech, which is one of the only, there might be another that I'm not aware of, so I'm not going to say the only, but he's one of the only tech shows that comes at things from, an anarchist sort of philosophy and explains all of the reasons why certain things are horrible. And he's been getting a lot of flack recently for saying that some of the Bitcoin 2.0 sort of things aren't really good ideas. And I was actually on a Bitcoin panel with him at Keene before this show, and somebody had asked the question to Brian specifically of, so what do you think about using blockchain technology for voting and lawmaking and this and that? And his answer, and I loved it, was, those are already bad ideas. Putting them on the blockchain doesn't make them good ideas.
Right. There's like a 49ers sense right now. Well, I mean, at this point, it's totally been an ab reaction. But we've seen everybody from all walks of life, understand that there's this new idea, the blockchain, and trying to adapt different decision-making tools and consensus-making procedures to it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, good things can shake out, but I am a bit tired of it at this point. There's the Windover principles and all these Bitcoin startups that have just thrown down with New York and California to none of our benefit. And only the status quo's benefit. So there's this constant capitulation and recapitulation from these startups and legacy powers using Bitcoin to do all the things that aren't the freedom promotion, ideas that we thought were at the heart of Bitcoin. So we need more of the work of Mr. Sovereign.
And
right?
hopefully people like you, Cody, will continue finding ways around various laws that get thrown up. I know there was the proposal by the New York Department of Financial Services to create what was being called a bit license, which would regulate all virtual currency businesses. If one guy ever went through New York that one time, maybe then you have to collect every bit of information from all of your customers. So hopefully, people come up with ways around that. Bitcoin Not Bombs came out with the intergalactic bit license. And Cody, I know you're doing good work. Defense Distributed is his website. Cody, thanks for being on the show.
A real pleasure. Love to come back.
And tune in next week. Very special announcement next week. Tune in.